The champagne glasses clinked like tiny bells throughout the massive ballroom. Women in gowns that cost more than most people's cars laughed at jokes that weren't really funny. Men in perfectly tailored suits talked about stocks and real estate deals, their voices mixing into a dull hum of wealth and importance. Robert Chen stood near the enormous window of his penthouse, looking out at the glittering lights of Manhattan below. He should have felt on top of the world. This was his party after all. His annual charity event that everyone in New York's elite circles wanted to attend. The same event that raised millions of dollars each year and got his picture in all the business magazines. But tonight, something felt off. Maybe it was the fake smiles. Maybe it was the way people only laughed at his jokes because he was rich. Or maybe after building a technology empire worth $3 billion, he had simply run out of things to feel excited about. He took a sip of his champagne and watched his guests. There was the real estate mogul who had been investigated for fraud twice. The venture capitalist who treated his assistants like garbage. The socialite who spent more on her dog's wardrobe than most families earned in a year. These were his people, his circle, and God, he was tired of all of them. The hired pianist was supposed to start playing 20 minutes ago, but apparently, she had gotten stuck in traffic somewhere in Queens. Robert's event planner was running around frantically making phone calls, her face getting redder by the minute. The guests were getting restless. Some had already started checking their phones, ready to move on to the next party, the next event, the next place to be seen. That's when Robert noticed her. She wasn't supposed to be noticed, of course. That was the whole point of people like her. They were meant to blend into the background, to move like ghosts through the spaces of the wealthy, making everything perfect without ever being seen. Her name was Rosa, though Robert had only learned that because he made a point of knowing everyone who worked in his home. She had been part of his cleaning staff for 3 years now. Always on time, always thorough, never complained, never asked for anything, just did her job and disappeared. But tonight, she wasn't quite invisible. Robert watched as Rosa moved along the edge of the ballroom, collecting empty glasses from the high tables scattered throughout the room. She worked with practiced efficiency, her movements quick but careful. She wore the same simple uniform as the rest of the staff, black pants, white shirt, sensible shoes that didn't make noise on the marble floor. But it wasn't her uniform that caught his attention. It was the way she kept looking at the piano. The Steinway grand piano sat in the center of the ballroom like a black jewel, its polished surface reflecting the light from the crystal chandeliers above. Robert had paid $500,000 for that piano. Not because he played, he didn't, but because it looked impressive. Because it was the kind of thing people like him were supposed to own. Rosa passed by the piano, carrying her tray of empty glasses, and her steps slowed. Just for a moment. Her eyes lingered on the keys and something crossed her face. Something that looked almost like pain, like hunger, like someone staring at water after days in the desert. Then she caught herself, looked away quickly, and continued toward the kitchen. Robert found himself watching for her to come back out. And she did, a few minutes later, now straightening the chairs that guests had pushed askew, picking up discarded napkins, making everything perfect again. And again, when she passed the piano, she looked at it, this time for just a second longer. Her hand even reached out slightly, her fingers moving in the air as if playing invisible keys, before she pulled her hand back and hurried away. It was the most interesting thing Robert had seen all night. "Robert, there you are." His event planner rushed up to him, nearly spilling her own champagne in her hurry. "I'm so sorry, but the pianist isn't going to make it. There's been a massive accident on the Queensboro Bridge. Traffic is completely stopped. I've called everyone I can think of, but it's Saturday night and every pianist in the city is already booked. I don't know what to do. People are starting to leave." Robert barely heard her. He was still watching Rosa, who was now on the far side of the room wiping down a table that didn't need wiping. "Robert, did you hear me? What should we do?" An idea was forming in his mind. A wild, probably stupid idea. The kind of impulse that his business advisors would have talked him out of if they knew what he was thinking. But Robert hadn't built a $3 billion company by always playing it safe. Sometimes the best moves were the ones that seemed completely insane. "I have an idea," he said quietly. "Thank God. What is it? Should I set up a speaker system for recorded music? Or maybe we could—" "No," Robert said. He handed his champagne glass to his confused event planner and started walking across the ballroom floor. The conversations around him continued. Nobody was paying attention to him yet. They were all too busy being important, being seen, being everything they thought they needed to be. "Excuse me?" Robert said loudly. "Everyone, can I have your attention, please?" The conversations died down slowly. People turned to look at him. After all, he was the host. The man whose name was on the invitation. The billionaire whose approval could open doors or slam them shut. "You," Robert called out, looking directly at Rosa. "Can you come here for a moment?" Rosa froze. She had been picking up a napkin from under a chair. Now she straightened slowly, the napkin clutched in her hand, her eyes wide with confusion and something that looked like fear. The room had gone completely silent now. 300 pairs of eyes turned to look at the cleaning lady in her simple uniform. Robert could see the panic on her face, could see her looking around for her supervisor, for anyone who could tell her what she had done wrong, why the billionaire was calling her out in front of all these people. "It's okay," Robert said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "I just want to ask you something." Rosa walked toward him slowly, like someone approaching the edge of a cliff. The crowd parted to let her through. Robert could hear whispers starting up, could see the confused and amused expressions on his guests' faces. When Rosa reached him, she stood with her eyes down, still holding that napkin like it might protect her from whatever was about to happen. "What's your name?" Robert asked gently, even though he already knew. "Rosa, sir," she said quietly. Her voice had an accent soft and musical. "Rosa Mendez. I'm very sorry if You didn't do anything wrong," Robert interrupted. He paused, very aware that everyone was watching, listening to every word. "I've been watching you tonight. You keep looking at that piano. Tell me the truth, can you play?" Rosa's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his for the first time. And in that moment, Robert saw everything he needed to see. The answer was written all over her face. The longing, the loss, the desperate desire mixed with absolute terror. No, sir, I used to, but that was a long time ago. I'm just the cleaning lady. I shouldn't even be looking at it." "I'm sorry," Robert smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd felt on his face all evening. "I want to make you an offer," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Right now. In front of all these people." Rosa felt like her heart was going to beat right out of her chest. Every single person in that enormous ballroom was staring at her. Women in diamond necklaces that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. Men who made more money in a day than she made in a year. All of them looking at the cleaning lady like she was some kind of curiosity, some kind of entertainment. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, to be anywhere but standing in the center of this room in her cleaning uniform, while Robert Chen, the billionaire, spoke to her like she was one of his guests. "Here's my offer," Robert said, and his voice carried to every corner of the room. "I've seen you looking at that piano all night like it's calling to you. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to sit down at that piano and play something. Anything you want." The whispers started immediately. Rosa could hear them rippling through the crowd like wind through trees. She could feel the judgment, the amusement, the confusion. Her supervisor, Mrs. Kim, was standing near the kitchen door, her face pale with horror. "Sir, I can't," Rosa whispered. "I'm working. I'm supposed to be cleaning. I shouldn't even be." "And if you can play something," Robert continued, speaking over her protests loud enough for everyone to hear, "if you can play something that makes even one person in this room actually feel something real, I'll donate an additional $1 million to tonight's charity." The whispers turned into gasps, into excited chatter. $1 million. Just like that. Like it was nothing to him. Rosa's mind was spinning. $1 million. For a charity that helped homeless families. She knew which charity it was because she had seen the banners when she arrived to set up earlier. Her own family had stayed in one of their shelters 15 years ago, when they first came to America. When her mother was still alive. When everything was different. "I really can't," Rosa said again, but her voice was weaker now. Her eyes drifted to the piano despite herself. That beautiful, perfect piano that she had been dreaming about touching for 3 years. Every time she cleaned this penthouse, she had to walk past it. Had to dust around it. Had to pretend it didn't exist. "Why not?" Robert asked. There was something in his voice that wasn't mocking. He sounded genuinely curious. "You know how to play. I can tell. So why not?" "Because I'm nobody," Rosa blurted out. I'm the cleaning lady. These people didn't come here to watch someone like me. They came here to see people like them. I'll embarrass you. I'll embarrass myself. Please, sir, just let me go back to work. Robert shook his head. You know what I think? I think you're scared. Not of embarrassing anyone. You're scared because that piano means something to you. Something important. And you've convinced yourself that you don't deserve to touch it anymore. Rosa felt tears stinging her eyes. How did this stranger, this billionaire who probably didn't even remember her name most days, see right through her like that? Tell you what, Robert said, and now he was smiling. That same smile that had been on the cover of Forbes magazine last month. I dare you. Right here, right now. Play something. If it's terrible, then fine. Everyone will forget about it by tomorrow. But if it's good, he paused. If it's good, then maybe you'll remember that you're not just the cleaning lady. Maybe you're something more. The room had gone completely silent again. Waiting. Watching. Rosa could feel 300 pairs of eyes on her, but for some reason the only ones she could really see were Robert's, and they weren't mocking. They weren't cruel. They were challenging, like he was daring her to be brave. Okay, Rosa heard herself say. The word came out before she could stop it, before her fear could swallow it back down. Okay, I'll do it, the crowd murmured with excitement. Someone actually clapped. Rosa felt like she was floating outside her own body as she walked toward the piano. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of dream. Or a nightmare. She couldn't tell which. Her supervisor rushed forward, her face panicked. Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry. Rosa shouldn't have agreed to this. She needs to get back to work. I can send someone else to— It's fine, Mrs. Kim, Robert said calmly. Rosa has my permission. In fact, everyone on staff has the rest of the night off, with full pay. Go enjoy some of the food in the kitchen. You've all earned it. Mrs. Kim looked like she wanted to argue, but you didn't argue with billionaires, especially not ones who paid as well as Robert Chen. She shot Rosa a look that said they would definitely be talking about this later, then retreated toward the kitchen. Rosa reached the piano. Up close, it was even more beautiful than she had imagined. The wood was so perfectly polished she could see her reflection in it. Her tired reflection, her scared reflection. The reflection of a 40-year-old woman in a cleaning uniform who hadn't played piano in front of anyone in 23 years. She sat down on the bench slowly. It was made of the softest leather, more comfortable than her couch at home. Her hands were shaking as she placed them on the keys. The keys were cool and smooth under her fingers, perfect. Of course they were perfect. Everything in Robert Chen's world was perfect. Behind her, she could hear people moving closer, gathering around. Someone laughed, not a mean laugh, but not a kind one either. The laugh of someone who thought this was going to be entertaining. Who thought the cleaning lady was about to make a fool of herself? Rosa closed her eyes. She tried to remember the last time she had played a real piano. A good piano. It had been in Bogota in her teacher's studio. She had been 16 years old. Her teacher, Senora Valencia, had told her she had a gift, had told her mother that Rosa could study at the conservatory, could maybe even play professionally one day. Then her father died. Then the money ran out. Then her mother packed their lives into 2 suitcases and brought them to New York, to her sister's tiny apartment in Queens. And Rosa had to let go of the dream because dreams didn't pay rent. Dreams didn't put food on the table. Dreams were luxuries for people who could afford them. For 23 years, she had cleaned offices and apartments and penthouses. She had scrubbed toilets and mopped floors and made other people's lives perfect, while her own dreams gathered dust in the back of her mind. Sometimes she played on the old electric keyboard at the community center on her day off. But it wasn't the same. It was never the same. But now her fingers were on a real piano, a Steinway grand piano that probably cost more than she would earn in 10 years. And 300 wealthy people were waiting to hear what the cleaning lady could do. Rosa took a deep breath. She thought about her mother, who had been gone for 5 years now, who had worked 3 jobs so Rosa could eat, who had given up everything so her daughter could have a chance at something better, who had cried the day Rosa told her she was dropping out of the community college music program to work full-time. For you, Mama, Rosa whispered in Spanish so quietly that nobody could hear, and then she began to play. The first notes that came from the piano were soft, so soft that some people in the back of the crowd had to lean forward to hear them. Rosa had chosen Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was the first piece her teacher had ever taught her. The piece she had played at her first recital in Bogota when she was 12 years old. Her fingers felt stiff at first. Clumsy. She had played this piece 1,000 times in her mind over the years, but her fingers hadn't touched a real piano like this in so long. Too long. What if she couldn't do it anymore? What if all those years of cleaning and scrubbing had erased the gift she used to have? But then something happened. Something she couldn't explain. Her fingers remembered. They remembered the way they used to dance across the keys, the way they used to fly and dip and climb like birds. The muscle memory that had been sleeping for 23 years suddenly woke up. The soft notes grew stronger. More confident, the melody began to unfold like a flower opening to the sun. In the crowd, the whispers stopped. The man who had laughed earlier wasn't laughing anymore. A woman who had been checking her phone put it away. Someone who had started to turn toward the bar froze mid-step. The music was beautiful. Not just technically correct, though it was that too. But it was more than that. It had something that all the hired pianists and professional musicians who had played in this ballroom before had never quite managed to bring. It had soul. It had pain. It had the weight of real life pressed into every single note. Rosa wasn't thinking about the crowd anymore. She wasn't thinking about her uniform or her job or the fact that she was supposed to be invisible. She was thinking about her father, who used to sit and listen to her practice for hours, who would close his eyes and smile and tell her that her music could make flowers grow. She was thinking about her mother, washing dishes in other people's homes while Rosa was in school, sacrificing everything so her daughter could have piano lessons. She was thinking about the day she sold her keyboard, the cheap one her mother had bought her for her 17th birthday to help pay for her mother's medication. The day she accepted that music was something that belonged to her past, not her future. All of that pain, all of that loss, all of those dreams that had died quietly in the dark, it all poured out through her fingers and into the piano. The Chopin piece wasn't just notes anymore. It was a story. Her story. In the front of the crowd, Robert stood completely still. He had made his fortune by reading people, by understanding what they wanted before they knew they wanted it themselves. But he had never felt anything like this. His chest felt tight. His eyes were burning. When was the last time he had actually felt something at one of these events? When was the last time anything had moved him like this? He looked around at his guests. The real estate mogul had tears running down his cheeks. The venture capitalist was staring at Rosa with his mouth slightly open, like he had forgotten how to close it. The socialite who spent fortunes on her dog was holding her husband's hand, gripping it tight like she needed something real to hold on to. Everyone was feeling it. The music had cracked something open in the room. All the fake smiles and polite conversations and careful masks had fallen away. And for just a moment, 300 wealthy people were just people. Just human beings listening to something beautiful and real. Rosa's fingers moved faster now, building toward the crescendo. The piece was reaching its emotional peak, and she was right there with it. She wasn't in the ballroom anymore. She was 16 again, playing in her teacher's studio. Senora Valencia was smiling at her, telling her that she had something special, that she was meant to do this. That music like hers came from the heart, and you couldn't teach that. You either had it or you didn't. You have it, Rosa, her teacher had said. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't. But life had told her exactly that. Life had told her that dreams were for other people. That girls like her, girls whose fathers died and left them with nothing, had to be practical, had to survive, had to push their gifts down into some dark corner and forget they ever existed. Except she had never really forgotten. Not completely. Every time she dusted around a piano in someone's apartment, the music was still there. Every time she heard classical music playing somewhere, her fingers would move in the air, playing along with melodies only she could hear. The gift had never died. It had just been buried, waiting. The final notes of the Chopin piece rang out through the ballroom. Rosa held the last chord, letting it fade slowly into silence. Her hands were still shaking. Her face was wet with tears. She hadn't realized she was crying. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The silence was so complete you could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Then someone started clapping. It was Robert. He was clapping so hard his palms hurt, and then everyone else joined in. The applause started like a wave and grew into a roar. People weren't just clapping politely like they did for the hired entertainment. They were standing up. They were shouting. Some of them were crying openly now, not caring that their makeup was running or that people could see them being emotional. Rosa turned around on the piano bench, stunned. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. These people, these wealthy, important people who probably went to the symphony every week, they were giving her a standing ovation. Her, the cleaning lady in the simple uniform who wasn't supposed to be noticed, but she barely had time to take it in because something was happening. Something was moving through her like electricity. She wasn't done. The Chopin piece had opened something inside her, and now it was pouring out and she couldn't stop it even if she wanted to. She turned back to the piano. "Wait!" Someone in the crowd shouted. "Is she playing more?" Rosa's fingers found the keys again. But this time she wasn't playing Chopin. She wasn't playing anything that had been written by someone else. She was playing something that had been living in her head for 15 years, something she had been composing in the quiet moments between cleaning jobs, in the minutes before she fell asleep at night, in the subway rides to and from work. Her own music, her own composition, the piece she had never played for anyone because she thought it wasn't good enough. Because she thought she wasn't good enough. But right now, in this moment, she didn't care about good enough. She just needed to play it. She needed to let it out before it burned her up from the inside. The melody started low and dark, like storm clouds gathering. It was nothing like the Chopin piece. This was raw. This was angry. This was every floor she had scrubbed on her hands and knees. Every time someone had looked through her like she was invisible. Every dream she had buried. Every time she had passed by a piano and felt her heart break just a little bit more. The guests who had started to relax, to smile, to feel good about being moved by the nice cleaning lady, suddenly went quiet again. This music wasn't comfortable. It wasn't pretty. It was real in a way that made people uncomfortable, made them think about things they tried not to think about. But then the melody began to change. The dark, angry melody began to soften. It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, like dawn breaking after the longest night. The storm clouds in Rosa's music started to part and something else came through. Something that sounded like hope. Not the cheap, easy kind of hope that people put on greeting cards. This was hope that had been earned. Hope that had survived. Hope that existed not because life was easy, but because the human spirit refused to break even when everything tried to break it. Rosa's fingers flew across the keys now, building to something bigger. The melody climbed higher and higher, and with it came all the things she had never said out loud. The pride she felt when her daughter graduated high school, even though Rosa had to work double shifts to make it happen. The joy of those stolen moments at the community center keyboard, when she could pretend for just a little while that she was still that girl with the gift. The quiet strength of her mother's hands, worn and calloused from work, but still able to hold Rosa when she cried. The music swelled into a crescendo that seemed to fill every corner of the enormous ballroom. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was feeling made audible. It was every person who had ever worked 2 jobs to feed their kids. Every immigrant who had left everything behind for a chance at something better. Every dream that had been postponed but never completely forgotten. Robert felt something break open in his chest. He had built his empire by being smart, by being ruthless when he needed to be, by understanding markets and algorithms and human psychology. But none of that had prepared him for this, for standing in his own ballroom and feeling like he was finally understanding something important, something he had been missing his whole life. Around him, his guests weren't even pretending to maintain their composure anymore. The real estate mogul was sobbing openly, not caring who saw. A woman Robert didn't even know had her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. 2 men in expensive suits were holding on to each other like they needed the support to stay standing. Even the catering staff had emerged from the kitchen. They stood in the doorway, still in their work uniforms just like Rosa, watching one of their own do something impossible, something that wasn't supposed to happen to people like them. Rosa's composition began to slow. The storm had passed. The anger had transformed. What remained was something that sounded like acceptance, like peace. Not the peace of giving up, but the peace of someone who had fought hard and survived and was still here, still standing, still able to create beauty despite everything. The final notes were soft again, just like the beginning of the Chopin piece. But these notes were different. They weren't sad. They were gentle, forgiving. They sounded like a lullaby her mother used to sing, like a promise that tomorrow might be better, like the feeling of coming home. Rosa played the last chord and let it ring out slowly. Her hands were trembling so badly now that she had to pull them away from the keys and press them together in her lap. She couldn't look at the audience. She couldn't face whatever was coming next. She had just poured out her entire soul in front of 300 strangers, and now she felt completely empty, completely exposed. The silence lasted even longer this time. 5 seconds, 10. Rosa's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could probably hear it. Had she made a terrible mistake? Had she gone too far? This was supposed to be an elegant charity event, and she had just played something so raw and personal, and the applause that erupted was like nothing Rosa had ever heard in her life. It wasn't polite. It wasn't contained. It was explosive. People were shouting, cheering. The standing ovation from before was nothing compared to this. This was 300 people who had just witnessed something they would talk about for the rest of their lives. "Bravo!" someone shouted. "Incredible. Who is she?" another voice called out. "Where did she study?" That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Robert was the first one to reach the piano. His face was wet with tears he hadn't even tried to hide. He didn't care. This was real. This was what he had been missing at all these parties, all these events, all these years of surrounding himself with people who only cared about money and status and being seen. "Rosa," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "That was... I don't even have words. Where did you learn to compose like that?" Rosa finally looked up at him. Her eyes were red from crying. Her hands were still shaking. "I didn't learn," she said quietly. "I've been writing it in my head for 15 years. Since I had to stop taking lessons, since I thought I would never play again, I would work it out on the subway in my mind. I would play it on my fingers against the steering wheel of the bus. I never thought I would actually play it on a real piano. I never thought anyone would hear it." More people were crowding around now. A woman in a silver dress pushed her way to the front. "You have to tell me your story," she said. She was crying too. "Please. That music, it was like you were telling us something important. Something true." "I'm nobody," Rosa said, the words automatic after so many years. "I'm just... Don't," Robert interrupted her. His voice was firm but not unkind. "Don't say you're nobody. Not after what we just heard. Tell us your story, please." And so Rosa did. Standing there in her cleaning uniform, surrounded by people in designer clothes and expensive jewelry, she told them everything. About growing up in Bogota, about her teacher, Senora Valencia, who saw something special in her, about her father's death when she was 16, about coming to America with her mother and 2 suitcases, about having to choose between her dreams and survival. "My mother used to clean houses," Rosa said, her voice breaking, "just like I do now. She would come home so tired she could barely stand. But she always asked me if I had practiced that day, on the little electric keyboard we bought at a garage sale, and I would tell her yes, even though that keyboard was missing half its sounds and some of the keys stuck. She would smile and say that one day I would play in concert halls, that one day people would pay to hear me play." Rosa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She died 5 years ago. She never got to see that happen. She worked herself to death so I could have a better life, and I spent that life cleaning other people's houses, just like she did. I thought I had failed her. I thought I had wasted the gift she sacrificed so much for. "You haven't wasted anything," a man's voice said from the crowd. Rosa looked over and saw an older gentleman in a tuxedo. She recognized him from magazines. He was the conductor of the New York Philharmonic. That composition, that was concert-worthy. That was better than half the pieces we perform. "You have real talent. Trained talent." "I had 3 years of lessons," Rosa said. "When I was 13 to 16. That's all. Everything else I taught myself." The conductor shook his head in disbelief. 3 years? That's impossible. The technique, the emotional depth, the composition itself, that takes decades of study. Or one lifetime of living. Robert said quietly. He turned to Rosa. "I promised $1 million to charity if you could make one person feel something. I think you did a little better than that." Robert kept his word about the $1 million, but that was just the beginning. What happened over the next few hours changed Rosa's life in ways she never could have imagined. The conductor of the New York Philharmonic wasn't the only important person in that ballroom. There was also the director of a prestigious music conservatory, a famous music producer, several arts journalists, and dozens of wealthy people who suddenly wanted to do something meaningful with their money instead of just spending it on another vacation home or luxury car. Before the night was over, Robert pulled Rosa aside. The party was still going strong, but it had transformed into something different. People weren't just networking anymore. They were actually talking to each other. Really talking. About things that mattered. About the performance they had just witnessed. About their own buried dreams and forgotten passions. "I want to make you an offer," Robert said. They were standing on his balcony away from the crowd. The Manhattan skyline glittered before them. "And before you say no, I want you to actually think about it." Rosa was exhausted. Emotionally drained. She had cried more in the past hour than she had in the past year. "Mr. Chen, you've already been so generous. The $1 million for the charity?" "This isn't about charity," Robert interrupted. "This is about talent. About not wasting gifts that only come around once in a generation. I want to pay for you to go back to school. To study music properly. Full scholarship. Any program you want. The conservatory director already told me she would accept you on the spot after hearing you play." Rosa's breath caught in her throat. "I can't. I have bills. I have my daughter. She's in college right now and I'm helping her with expenses. I can't just stop working to go be a student. That's not how life works for people like me." "So keep working," Robert said. "For me, not as a cleaner. As my personal cultural advisor. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but tonight made me realize something. I've been surrounding myself with beautiful things, art, music, culture, but I don't actually understand any of it. I buy it because it's what people like me are supposed to buy. But I don't feel it. Not like I felt what you played tonight." He leaned against the balcony railing. "Help me understand it. Come to concerts with me. Teach me about music. About what makes it matter. I'll pay you 3 times what you're making now. You can study during the day and work for me a few evenings a week. We'll make it work." Rosa stared at him. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." "Because talent like yours doesn't come along every day," Robert said simply. "And because I've spent the last 10 years of my life making money. And I can't remember the last time I felt anything as real as what I felt tonight. You reminded me that there's more to life than profit margins and stock prices. That's worth something. That's worth a lot, actually." Rosa looked out at the city lights. At the city that had taken so much from her but had also given her a daughter, a life, a chance. "I'm 40 years old," she said quietly. "Most musicians start when they're children. They spend their whole lives preparing. I'm starting over so late." "You're not starting over," Robert said. "You never stopped. You just had to pause for a while. There's a difference." The next 2 years were the hardest and most beautiful of Rosa's life. She studied at the conservatory during the day, taking advanced classes with students half her age. At first they looked at her like she didn't belong. The middle-aged woman in the simple clothes who showed up to music theory class with calluses on her hands from years of cleaning work. But then they heard her play. And after that, nobody looked at her that way anymore. She worked with Robert several evenings a week. They went to concerts together. She taught him to really listen to music, not just hear it. She watched him slowly transform from someone who attended cultural events because he was supposed to, into someone who actually understood why they mattered. And Robert helped her too. He introduced her to people, opened doors that would have stayed closed, made phone calls to people who wouldn't have taken her calls. He used his influence not to buy her success, but to make sure her talent got seen by the right people. Rosa still worked. She had to. Even with Robert's generous salary, she had expenses. Her daughter's college tuition, her rent, the basic costs of living that didn't go away just because she was following a dream now. But she wasn't cleaning anymore. She was building something, creating something, becoming something she had thought was lost forever. Her daughter, Christina, was her biggest supporter. "Mom, you should see your face when you come home from the conservatory," she said one night. "You look 10 years younger. You look happy. Actually happy, not just okay." "I feel guilty sometimes," Rosa admitted. "Like I should have done this earlier. Like I wasted so many years." "You didn't waste anything," Christina said firmly. "You survived. You raised me. You kept your gift alive even when it would have been easier to let it die. That's not wasting time. That's being strong." 2 years after that night at the gala, Rosa gave her first official concert. Not as the cleaning lady who surprised everyone, but as Rosa Mendez, pianist and composer. The concert was at a small venue, not Carnegie Hall or anywhere famous. But it was hers. Her music. Her moment. Robert was in the front row. So was Christina. So was Mrs. Kim, her former supervisor who had become an unexpected friend. So was the conductor of the New York Philharmonic, and the director of the conservatory, and dozens of other people whose lives Rosa had touched over the past 2 years. She played the Chopin Nocturne first, as a tribute to where she had started. Then she played her own composition, the one she had performed that night at the gala. But she had finished it now, extended it, refined it. It was no longer just about pain and survival. It was about transformation, about second chances, about finding your way back to yourself even when the path seems impossible. When the concert ended, the standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Rosa stood on that small stage, tears streaming down her face, and thought about her mother, about her father, about that 16-year-old girl in Bogota who had dreamed of being a pianist and thought that dream had died. The dream hadn't died. It had just been waiting. After the concert, Rosa didn't become world famous overnight. Life doesn't work like that, even in the best stories. But she had something better than fame. She had purpose. She had her gift back. She had proven to herself that it was never too late to become who you were meant to be. She started teaching too. Not at fancy private studios, but at community centers, at immigrant resource programs, at schools in neighborhoods where kids didn't usually get music lessons. She taught people who looked like her, who came from where she came from, who had dreams they thought they had to bury because survival came first. Music doesn't belong to rich people, she told her students. It belongs to anyone who can feel it, anyone who needs it. And some of the most beautiful music comes from people who have lived real lives, who know what it means to struggle, to lose, to keep going anyway. Robert started a foundation with her help. They called it Second Act, and it provided scholarships and support for adult students who wanted to pursue their artistic dreams after years of putting them aside. Rosa helped run it while continuing to study, to perform, to teach, to compose. 3 years after that night at the gala, a video of Rosa's original performance went viral. Someone had recorded it on their phone, the moment when the cleaning lady sat down at the billionaire's piano and played like her life depended on it. The video got millions of views. People shared it with captions like "Never give up on your dreams" and "It's never too late" and "This made me cry." Rosa watched the video one night with Christina. She saw herself in that cleaning uniform, sitting at that piano looking so scared and so determined at the same time. It felt like watching a different person, someone from another life. "Do you ever miss it?" Christina asked. "The simple life? Before all this?" Rosa thought about it carefully. "I miss the quiet sometimes," she said honestly. "But I don't miss burying my gift. I don't miss pretending I was less than I am. Your grandmother always told me that God gives everyone gifts, but it's up to us what we do with them. I spent 23 years hiding mine because I thought I didn't have the right to use it anymore. I'm not hiding anymore." She stood up and walked to the piano that now sat in their small apartment. Not a Steinway grand, she couldn't afford that, but a good piano. A real piano. She sat down and played a few notes, just for herself, just because she could. "The best part," Rosa said, "is that I get to help other people find their way back to their gifts too. Every person I teach, every scholarship we give out, every adult who walks into one of our programs thinking it's too late, they all remind me why that night at the gala mattered. Not because it made me special, but because it proved that gifts don't expire, dreams don't die. They just wait for us to be brave enough to reach for them again." Robert stopped by later that evening. He and Rosa had become real friends over the years. Not the billionaire and the former cleaning lady. Just two people who had helped each other find something true. "I have news," he said, grinning. "The conservatory wants to commission a full concert of your compositions. Full orchestra. Professional musicians. The works." Rosa felt her heart skip. "Robert, I don't know if I'm ready for—" "You're ready," he said. "You were ready 3 years ago. You were ready 23 years ago. The world just wasn't ready to listen, but it is now." And he was right. Rosa's concert the following year was performed by the New York Philharmonic. Her mother's name was printed in the program as the dedication. The concert hall was full. And when Rosa walked out on that stage, not as the cleaning lady, not as someone's charity case, but as the composer and pianist she had always been meant to be, she finally understood something important. She hadn't been discovered that night at Robert's gala. She had been herself all along. The gift had always been there. She had just needed someone to dare her to stop hiding it, and she had needed to be brave enough to say yes.